wonderful things. So I'm going to start again and introduce Tenesha Brooks. She is a social worker, and I was about to tell her that she was actually the first social worker that I'd met in the United States that did clinical social work. In South Africa or even Zimbabwe, we don't have clinical social work as a specialization. The social work that we learn doesn't have the clinical component. So it was pretty cool to meet you and then eventually go on this journey. I didn't think I'd be a clinical social worker. So it's pretty cool. So I'm going to have Tenesha take it away and tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Tenesha Brooks, licensed clinical social worker. I co-own a therapy private practice with my husband called Brooks Psychological Services. And it's an online therapy practice geared towards Black professionals. And it's a space to take off that 9-to-5 armor, to put aside the code switching and just truly be heard. And so we help Black professionals that are struggling with anxiety, imposter syndrome, dealing with microaggressions at work, struggling with burnout. So just all things Black professionals. I became a social worker. It's been almost like 15 years now, I think, since I've been a social worker. Yep. And I've, bounced around in different settings and working with different populations. I started off working with children and families, and, drifted over to working with couples, and then drifted over to working with families and siblings of individuals with on the autism spectrum or with special needs. And then kind of settle into this space of working primarily with Black professionals and students. We work with students as well around these different areas.
Wow. You've been a social worker for 15 years. What led you to...
I really just thought about it's been a while.
Wow. What led you to this profession? I know that, I feel like from what I know in the history of social work to me became more profound during the pandemic because obviously people had a lot of mental health needs, but you were a clinician way before the pandemic. So what inspired you to get into this field?
Yeah. So when I was in undergrad, I originally was doing pre-med. Yeah, but my undergrad degree was in family studies. So I was really interested in, dynamics within families. And I was like, I can use this, as a doctor, I can help as I'm working with the children or adults, of course, families are always going to be involved in healthcare. So I can, help with, understanding the family dynamics. But as I began to study, more about, family dynamics, communication, mental health, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And I was like, you know what? I want to do this. Before I wanted to be a neurologist or neurosurgeon. And now I'm like, no, I want to work with the brain in a different way. And so I also had I was doing a mentorship program, and one of my mentees was needing some resources in the area and had a really hard time finding it, and just really helping her navigate the various systems that she was needing to access made me really just realize people, it's hard doing this stuff all by yourself. And so if I can, help somebody as they're navigating their mental health journey or trying to access resources, I feel like that would be a really good fit for me. And so initially I wanted to work with pregnant and parenting teens, but could never find a job directly in that area. But I've worked with, some pregnant parenting teens along the way. And the cool thing about social work is you can start off with one area of interest, end up in so many different areas, working with elders, working with people with, special needs. You can work with severe mental illness. You can work with people who are just needing some additional support to get through their day to day. You can work with people who just need, some strategies to deal with their anxiety. And so it's just a really cool space to be in. to be able to help people just become better versions of themselves.
Wow. Now, I'm curious to know why you chose Black professionals. I totally appreciate the fact that, you were called into this profession. I think social work is definitely a calling. I always tell people that I know that there's some ideas around like what social work is, and I'm so grateful that you were able to explain and say there's just so many different types of social work. You can get into so many things. But for you in particular, what made you decide I want to work with Black professionals?
Yeah. So as I started working with people, with adults individually, I kept getting a lot of professionals that were struggling with, showing up in their work environment, feeling like they couldn't be their authentic self, feeling like, they had all the accolades, all the everything on paper, like, on paper, I'm the best for this position. But then when they got into the roles and they got into, the boardrooms or in the office, just kind of switching into that culture was really difficult. And I started seeing quite a few people on my caseload having that struggle. One of the things that, and I've accessed therapy myself, I've had several therapists over the years, but one of the things that really helped me was having therapists that looked like me. And so I wanted to specifically serve people who looked like me, who needed that support, and who even felt some shame or embarrassment around needing it. But at least with me, it was like, okay, I can just be me. I have a space where I can just tell somebody what's going on and they at least understand. If somebody tells me something about something that a coworker said that was just off, or somebody made a comment about their hair, I can understand that. I can get that because I've experienced some of those things as well. And so working with Black professionals to really gain that confidence, feel like they can either show up more as their authentic self in the work environment, or, figure out a path out if it's a toxic work environment, just really just helping people have better quality of life is just really, really important to me.
So you mentioned something I'm very curious about, which is shame and embarrassment that you talked about of, Black professionals, or even just a person who's wanting to engage in therapy, especially around, switching, which is another thing that you mentioned. So if you could explain to us a little bit more what this shame and embarrassment is, and also how that can tie into a person switching into the corporate environment, what that even looks like and what that even means.
So I'll start with code switching first. So every culture has their way of relating, right? So, there are hand gestures, there are word slang, particularly in African American culture, but other cultures too have slang. But, the ways that we engage, the volume of our voices when we're engaging. And, I can think of many different cultures where volume is just part of how we communicate. Not just among Black people, but, Italians, are seen as loud, and it's just, this is how we talk. Greeks as well. So, when you get into a corporate work environment, that also has a culture. And sometimes the culture that you come from does not align. In order to get by, we shift to whatever that culture is. Now, I can speak as a Black person, because that's what I am. A lot of times we learn early how to code switch. Sometimes that learning even starts at home, right? So, you may have a parent or an elder in your family that says, don't use that language when you come in my house, or when you go to certain spaces, you don't use that language there. You have to speak properly, right? So you learn very early on how you're supposed to engage and interact in different settings. And so when you come into a corporate setting, you might not be talking slang, but you may
Mm.
put on whatever your corporate speak is. You may choose to wear your hair in a certain way to be received a certain way that you think you're going to be received. Thankfully, there's legislation that says you cannot be discriminated against because of your hair, but it's been a thing for years. And so, when you're coming into a different environment, putting on the language, putting on the demeanor, putting on whatever you think you should be in that environment is known as code switching. And for some people, first of all, it's not your normal natural self. And so just feeling like you have to be something that you're not is real uncomfortable. Also, if you don't understand the environment, because maybe you didn't grow up in the environment, maybe it's your first time in this particular setting, maybe you don't understand the norms or you don't understand exactly how to show up, that can be really difficult. Also, you may feel like you're showing up in a way of self-preservation because you're like, I need to come to the space. I need to get my work done. I need to be, excellent at my job. I'm not trying to get fired from this good job. So I'm just going to come in, keep my head down, get my work done, clock in and clock out. But maybe for your work culture, people are like, oh, that girl over there, she's mean. She doesn't come to lunch, or, she doesn't hang out with us at the water cooler. Whereas if I'm hanging out at the water cooler, hang out at the water cooler seems like I'm standoffish or I'm mean or I'm not trying to be a team player. And so all of these different things can cause anxiety and can
Tenesha?
a comment in a meeting and no one says anything. If it's the same thing and everyone's like, oh my goodness, what an amazing idea, what an amazing thought. And so that can also add to that feeling of like, ooh, I don't really feel like I belong. And so the shame can come into play where, someone who traditionally is confident and, is really like maybe even the life of the party outside of work or with their peers in the work environment, because they're not feeling like they can really fit in and really be their selves, or really they're not feeling like their contributions are really being appreciated, that can cause a dissonance that then causes shame, that then causes anxiety, that then causes these feelings of like, this is just feels so uncomfortable to me that I don't know if I can even do this.
It's very interesting. You just reminded me of when I actually started my career. I'd gone for an interview, and in my culture, we don't necessarily look people in the eye, especially older people or people of power. You're just not like staring into their eyeballs like that.
Yeah.
So I was nervous in the beginning of the interview. So I was looking at them mainly because I was trying to search for any nonverbal facial expressions that could kind of see and tell me if this conversation was going well. And then once I felt comfortable and safe to say whatever and answer the questions, I looked down. I mean, I wasn't noticing any of these things because you were talking about how, like how ways we engage, nonverbal, verbal cues, the way your hand gestures, the volume of your voice. And African families, if you hear me talking to my sisters on the phone, that's a completely different version of myself. So it took a couple of weeks for these people to call me back, and they said, well, Elinah, we wanted to offer you the position, but we were not sure if you were even interested in the position anymore. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she said, in the beginning of the interview, you seemed very interested and very engaged and answered questions, in a very we saw the confidence and that you really wanted this position. But eventually when the interview moved forward, you just didn't seem interested because you're looking down and not giving us, you're not gazing at us or looking at us. And I was like, no, it's actually the opposite. So when I'm hearing you talk, I'm like, I don't have the awareness that I'm switching. And I
Mm-hmm.
always feel like I have my American English voice, and then I have my African, I'm talking about what is going on in my life type of
Yeah.
voice. And then you also talked about how sometimes, like, and I remember this was also another challenge in the workplace that I had where people were like, oh, she's not very friendly. But then I've also been taught that if I'm too loud, if I'm too friendly, if I share too much about my personal life, that could get me into trouble and get me fired. These are things that are culturally part of who I am. So
Mm-hmm.
in my mind, I'm thinking, so there is a role that our cultural identity plays into Black professionals and their mental health. And I'm pretty sure these are some of the topics that you talk about in your sessions with them. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? And you mentioned dissonance. What is that for a person who doesn't know what dissonance looks like? And when you're helping someone like that, whose cultural identity is really like influencing their workplace, how do you help them overcome some of these issues coming up for them?
Mm-hmm. So dissonance is this feeling where there are either two separate feelings that are happening in your body at the same time and they don't kind of align,
Mm,
or it can be a sense of you are in an environment that doesn't align with your values or doesn't
mm,
align with what how you normally naturally act, but you feel like you have to become like that environment, and so that
mm,
creates this dissonance. So it's two
mm,
separate things that are kind of fighting to see which one should I be. Um, and so, when you're in the workplace, that feeling can arise if it's not feeling like a natural fit. And in some workplaces, go beyond just the regular discomfort to a
mm,
place of toxicity
mm,
where you may be encountering microaggressions, some of the things I mentioned. So, if someone is making comments about your appearance, or if someone is encroaching on your personal space in a way that you are not comfortable with, but seems to be the norm in the workspace.
mm,
If someone is making comments about your culture, your ethnicity, your race, if making, sometimes people make jokes they think are funny, but are actually quite offensive. And
mm,
so kind of the question of, okay, well, how do I respond to this? If I call this person out, what's going to be the ramification to me and my job and
mm,
this,
yes.
these interactions? I have to work with these people all day. So some
Mm,
people will just like, ha ha, laugh it off and just say, okay, I'm not going to engage with this person anymore because I'm not okay with that. Um, and then feel shame around that. Like, oh, I should have stood up for myself. I should have said something.
mm,
I should have called this person out. That's not okay.
mm,
But one of the things that I work with clients to understand is um, a lot of times we are operating from a place of self-preservation and what is truly best in that moment. So yes, you can
mm,
have regrets about not saying something, but there's a
mm,
reason why you responded in the way that you did. And so
mm,
let's try to understand that reason,
mm,
and let's try to either, build up the sense of self-assuredness that you can say something, or let's also examine the environment that you're in that doesn't make it
mm,
safe for you to say
mm,
something or advocate for yourself.
mm,
A lot of times, even imposter syndrome, the
mm,
term itself came out of research, not with people of color, but with white women that were in corporate environments in which they were feeling feelings of being less than, of not, stacking up. But really, it was the tenor of the environment that led to these feelings. It
mm,
was people not giving them voice at
mm,
the boardroom table. It
mm,
was the same thing I mentioned before of contributions being, passed over or even stolen. And
mm,
so when we look at imposter syndrome, especially with my Black professional clients, it may not be imposter syndrome that you're dealing with in the strictest
mm,
of terms based on the definition from literature. It may be that you are in a work environment that is toxic and does not allow you to have your contributions be heard, be acknowledged, be appreciated. It does not allow you to be your true self in the work setting. It does not celebrate you as the professional and all of the accolades that you do bring to the table. And so with my clients, my work is often about kind of let's take a look at that resume. Okay. Let's take a look at how you got this job in the first place. If you got this job, it means you're qualified. And so what coming up in your work environment when you're approaching tasks? What's coming up in your work environment when you're making presentations? What's happening in your meetings with your superiors, your manager, whoever is giving you feedback that is making you begin to feel like maybe I'm not good enough? What can happen in previous environments? So for many people, this begins in academia, where the same thing of, not being acknowledged, being passed over for, if you're working in a lab, being passed over for different projects, or if you're working in a lab, your work being taken from you and given to someone else, or someone else taking credit for it. In your as a college student, not recognizing that going to office hours is actually a safe space. Being friendly or cordial with your professors actually can help you in your college career. And so some of these things starts even before people get to that work environment. And so we kind of take a walk down history and see, where this is even stemming from. Maybe it's even stemming from even earlier childhood experiences, elementary education, things like that. And then we start to look at what they bring to the table. What do they say about themselves? What do other people say about them? With some of my clients, I do a running list of their accomplishments, or from quarterly or annual reviews, comments that other people have said about them as they've completed projects, so that they can go back and look at this evidence, look at this data that says, no, I belong here. I am contributing. I deserve to be here. I'm a great worker. And so that can help to build up that confidence and to remind them that even when they're feeling like, ooh, I'm out of place, it's like, no, I belong here. And my work, there's evidence that says that I belong.
I really appreciate the fact that you talked about how some of these things, it's not a clear-cut answer as to why, Black professionals or just people in general feel the shame and the guilt or experience that dissonance that you're mentioning. But as you were talking, I'm thinking to myself that, wow, like we always talk about evidence-based practice as clinical social workers. And I know that there's research out there sometimes that doesn't really represent Black people in evidence-based practice. When you're helping someone in this particular situation who is experiencing all these microaggressions, systemic racism, right? And all these are valid, by the way. These experiences are real for them, and they're having to negotiate some of these challenging things. What approaches or techniques are you using to help these clients?
Yeah, so I use a variety of different things in my work with clients. Some people call it integrative. Other people call it eclectic. I call it picking from my toolbox to do what I was working with clients, right? So I use a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy strategies. So kind of looking at our negative thoughts and replacing those. I use a lot of motivational interviewing around identifying readiness for change, especially when I have clients that are kind of at that crossroads of like, I either need to leave or something's got to give, but I'm not sure what, or I'm not sure if I'm ready to kind of make that step. I also use attachment. I do a lot of attachment theory work, typically around looking at dynamics within their family of origin that kind of developed thinking and that sense of being. I also pull from, what else do I use? Family systems.
Mm.
I also do some solutions focused grief therapy with clients that are just, wanting to kind of get some results quick and move on, so I do some of that. So I'm pulling from a variety of different theories and therapy modalities to help my clients, get the results that they're looking for. Always pulling from some mindfulness strategies, because especially when you're in an environment where you feel like you don't belong or you feel like you cannot be yourself, there's a lot of times there's anxiety that comes up when you're in that space. And even when you might leave that space, when you're at home, just thinking about going back to work. And so using breathing strategies, using even grounding strategies in the moment when you're in a meeting with a peer or a superior can be really, really important. Putting in mindfulness breaks throughout your day to just kind of like, whew, I need to like breathe and kind of release some of this this energy, this negative pent up anxious energy, can be really a game changer for clients. So a variety of things.
Well, thank you. It sounds like you've got a huge toolbox that I'm definitely going to pick your brain on once we're done with this recording. As you were talking, I just thought of something, right? And this is a conversation that I had with somebody, and we're talking about anxiety. Now, I know that a lot of people are getting a lot of information from different places, and because you're here today, we really want to utilize you so we get more information. And also a part of me is a little bit like very social justice, like a lot of social justice. And I've noticed like even on media, TikTok, a person will record an interaction with their employer that was very, very bad, or that showed like discrimination and all that stuff. I know that for, stating my positionality as a Black person, I do have that element of being a social justice warrior, right? Like I want to call people out on their microaggressions or their biases. At the same time, I'm also a mom, a wife, and I need to provide for my family, and I'm trying to negotiate that. And then at the same time, there's that true person that I am, right? That the super ego, the morality in me, which is just like screaming and yelling. So trying to negotiate those realities sometimes
it's
can
hard.
be very challenging. So I want to know from you, if I came to you in that particular situation, walk me through what that would look like.
Yeah. So the first thing that I would want to do is to find out what feels comfortable now. Like, what is our starting point for, there's all these different things that can pull you in different ways, right? But there are things that have more weight than others, right? And so what are your current priorities? And we can rank them, like what's the most important, and kind of go down that list. And doing that in a space where a lot of times people don't have the opportunity to just do that ranking without that extra piece of somebody being like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that's more important than the other thing, right? So it's just like, this is a neutral space. Let's rank these things and let's talk through it. Let's talk about, why they're important to you, why they're in this particular ranking order, right? And then let's talk about how you feel about the process of even having to rank and prioritize these various things. In a perfect world, you would be able to be all of these things 100%, but that's not necessarily the perfect world you live in. So we start there and just kind of have that conversation. Then we talk about where you would want to be, right? Like in that perfect world, where would you want to be, right? And then we also talk about, is the goal to get to that perfect world right now? Is it a goal in 5 years? Like, what do we need to do right now? Are we in survival mode, right? Are we just needing to, make our coins and figure out what our plan is so that we can get to that in 5 years? Are we at a place where we've been doing this dance for so long that it's just gotten to us so badly that can't think of anything else. We're struggling with sleeping. We're struggling with not being authentic self. So we need to switch things up like right now. Okay, what does that look like? What are the ramifications of that? What are the consequences of that? How are we able to manage that? And so that's where a lot of the self-care and mindfulness strategies come in, because if we are ready to go into fight mode, then we need a certain set of skills for that. If we're in maintenance mode, we need a certain set of skills for that. If we're in, I just need to, make it through, and now I'm just trying to figure out how I can make it through, I'm going to need a certain set of skills for that. And so in our work together, we're figuring out all of those things, and I'm walking alongside with the emotional piece of that too, of, the feelings of like, how can I be an example for my kids if I'm not standing up to every injustice, right? Also the emotions of, man, I wish I didn't have to do XYZ because I need these points. Or the emotions of, I'm ready to launch off and do my own thing, have my own business, but I'm scared of, what if that doesn't work? What if I don't have the funds for my family? So as we're figuring all this out, we're walking through, all the emotions that come along with it to really figure out what is the best thing for you right now at this moment. And place that you're wanting to be. And it looks different for every person, as it should, as it should.
Right. Yeah.
And I, no judgment for me. Where really is going to work for you in the immediate time. If we need to take a leave of absence from work to get a little breather and figure it out, okay, how do we need to do that? If we need to start looking for a new job because this is just not working out, how do we do that? And so just helping people feel more confident in the decisions that they're making, and being true to themselves regardless of what they decide, whatever actions they decide, helping them to find that that calmness, that centered feeling of like, all right, I'm doing what's right for me, even if the actual action that they're going to be doing is subpar. Making sure internally that, all right, I'm aligned with what my values are, what my goals are right now.
Sounds like you're creating a safe space for a person to kind of explore different options, especially in trying to navigate these things. I know when you're in a place of survival, it feels like you don't have any options. So I truly appreciate that you're creating a safe space for themselves and to have a conversation with you to explore what that looks like. So I know that, we are in a profession which is predominantly white. So and it's a privilege that, we have clinicians like yourself of color that can provide services for a person that looks like me. What if I don't have an option? Like I'm in Colorado Springs, where black clinicians are like one in a drop, especially that specialize with this type of topics. How does one build trust and rapport to talk about the things about microaggression and racism with somebody that does not look like them? How do I trust that? How do I trust this other person that is a representation of what it is that I'm trying to fight against? And would you recommend that? Because I feel like that's a conversation that we don't have. That sometimes we won't get people that look like us to provide services for us.
Definitely. Yeah. So I'm going to speak for my personal experience as well as professionally, right? So I've worked with a variety of different therapists, a variety of different ethnicities. My favorite therapist that I've worked with of all time was a white woman. And so the ways that just because someone isn't your ethnicity, your religion, your culture, does not mean that they cannot understand you, or does not mean that they cannot provide the space to do the work and ask you the hard questions for you to do the work. But how do you figure that out, right? So the first thing that I would do as you're searching for a therapist, ask yourself, like, what do I want in a therapist? What are the things that are most important, right? So it may be, it needs to be a Black person. Okay, that's your priority. That's cool. Find that person. Maybe it's they need to specialize in this particular area that I'm struggling with right now. And there are therapists that specialize in a variety of issues, you know, people that are more generalists, people that kind of specialize down to the nitty gritty. So figuring out, like, you know, what is that? For some people, it's language. And language is so important because a lot of times the emotions that we feel them in our language, our birth language, language that we spoke, you know, growing up. And so maybe it's finding someone who you can pour out your heart to in your mother tongue. So, you know, figuring out for yourself, thinking about it, like, okay, what's most important for me? Now, where do you go and find this person? So you can start with Google, do a Google search for, you know, Black therapist specializing in blah, 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 blah in my city. That'll bring some results. You can also go to certain registries, listings where they have therapists. So there's therapy for Black girls. There's inclusive therapists, which is a site for clinicians of color, clinicians for the queer community, clinicians that are inclusive of difference. Kind of start out on, so they're going to have a lot that are on there. Look, the therapist will have some sort of bio a little bit more like, okay, like, what is this person about? What are they, you know, what do they talk about? If you find someone in particular, do a Google search, see what Google has to say about this therapist. You know, they may have a footprint someplace. You may stumble on their LinkedIn page and read some things, or you may stumble on, you know, their website or things like that to really get a sense of like, okay, who is this person professionally? Now, you can then schedule your appointment, right? And so if you like what you see, what you've been kind of researching, then you can schedule that appointment. Go online if they have an online tool, or call them up and try to schedule that appointment. But really, it's going to be in those initial sessions with this person that you begin to get to know them. I advocate for interviewing your therapist when you're doing that initial call. Ask them those questions. Hi, you know, I'm a Black woman and I'm struggling with issues of racism at my workplace. Being that you're not a Black woman, how would you work with me on that? What's your philosophy? What's your practice? And see how they answer. The words that they say, but also how they say it can be telling, you know, and you trust your intuition. When you go to this first session, you, as you're telling them about yourself, you can ask people questions about themselves too. Definitely, clinicians have different levels of comfort with disclosure, but that doesn't prevent you from asking the question. The clinician can say, I'd love to answer that question, but about you, before me. Something that you would want to know. And once again, it's you're the one giving your time. And so you can ask those questions and do what you need to do to feel comfortable with this person that you're going to be seeing for who knows however long. So I typically say give it, 3 sessions to really get a sense of who this person is, what their style is, how they, approach the topics. And if you're feeling like, ooh, I'm not, it's not somebody else comfortable with it, move on to another person on your list of possible therapists.
Well, I appreciate that you mentioned 3 sessions, because I know sometimes, we don't really have the patience of giving people a chance. If it didn't go well the first time, you're just like, you know what, I'm not going to deal with it. I think in there you were mentioning a lot of things that I thought were incorporating cultural competency to practice, right? Because we might look the same, but that doesn't mean we come from the same culture or grew up the same way. So for you and your practice, I know there are some clinicians out there who are new or getting into this profession. How do you incorporate cultural competence into your practice, especially when working with Black professionals who, yes, Black professionals as a term, but they're very diverse. So how do you incorporate that into your practice?
In my initial sessions with my clients, I always want to know, where are you from? Who are your people? Anything that's important to you culturally? Are there any, religious ties, either kind of familial or that you currently practice? Just tell me about you. And so we always start from that place, as I'm just kind of in my initial session of just wanting to know about people. And so that's something that's really important. As they are sharing about themselves, or back to, something they shared earlier that is culturally relevant or that they mentioned was, an important thing. So for example, if someone says, oh yeah, I was raised Christian, but like, I don't really practice that right now. But then they bring up, something down the road where it's an issue that maybe in their family of origin or their, what they were raised as, there would be this perspective of how you do things. But now they're in a different community where there's a different perspective. Then I'll ask them like, oh, so I remember you said that you were raised Christian, and around this issue, my understanding is that, for Christians, they would do this, but with the life that you're living now or what you're trying to do now, that wouldn't necessarily be a priority. So, what's going on for you around that? And so it allows them an opportunity. They may be like, oh, I never even thought about that. Or they may be like, oh my goodness, that's what's been on my mind for this particular issue for the last 5 months. And so then we'll talk about it and begin to kind of sort through, what's going on for them with that particular experience. Mm-hmm. And so, if there's food is a big one in culture, eating meals and kind of sharing a meal, what are their norms or values around that? Particular phrases or sayings, if somebody drops a slang word that I haven't heard, and I'll be like, oh, like, explain that, what is that about? Or if someone, says like uses an idiom or uses a, what is it called? Oh goodness, my mind went blank. Those sayings, or like those sayings that,
a metaphor?
Not a metaphor, but like, it starts with a P. It's like, oh, grass is green on the other side, or,
I almost said a
whatever.
parable.
I was thinking parable, but it's not parable. So whatever, it'll come to me as soon as we're done with this. But stuff like that, where it's like, oh, like, what does, like, explain that to me. Like, what is it? Like, oh yeah, we say it, it's the same, we say it back home all the time. Oh, okay, cool. And this is what it means. Pieces of the room, because sometimes I remember when you were explaining the title of your podcast, it's steeped in a phrase from your culture, from your language. And so these things that sometimes there's things that can only be said with that saying, it can only, that is the most clear understanding. And so I'm like, yeah, like bring it, room and then try to explain it to me so I can understand it. So those are ways that I help my clients feel like they can bring their whole, full, true, authentic self into the room, and we can kind of, work from there.
I feel like you and I could spend the whole day talking about this. So I think my audience would like for me to invite you again. However, as we wrap up, I wanted you to share, if possible, if you could share a success story
Sure.
in your practice that's been impactful from your work with Black professionals.
Yes, absolutely. So I work with Black professionals, across levels. So, people from, entry level, just coming out of school and your first job up to, senior VP, C-suite, whatever. So, and you were like, oh my goodness, you've gotten so far in your career. How could you still be struggling with these things? But, this is just a part of the human experience. And so one experience that stands out for me came struggling with just feeling completely like she wasn't good enough in her role, feeling like, even though she had had a few promotions within the company, just feeling like she wasn't valued. And when she would start to share her viewpoint on, various things, it would just be bloop, shut down. But once again, if someone else brought it up, like, oh, that's the most amazing idea. Let's implement that right now. And so the thing that she came in thinking was, like, I can't sleep at night. I'm, really struggling to get up in the morning and get to work. I'm struggling with completing tasks. I have all these deadlines, but even just getting started with this, the task is really, it's really hard because, what if it's not right? What if this isn't what they're wanting? What if I do what I think is right, but, I have to start all over again. And so just really struggling with procrastination because of the anxiety that was being felt. So through working with this particular individual, she was able to recognize, yes, some of it is about me and just about my own anxiety, but a lot of it is about this environment. And just seeing her just kind of eyes being open to the fact that, like, no, this environment is not the best space for you. Was just really cool to see her begin to come into her sense of self and come into her just belief that, like, yeah, like, I am extremely qualified and my contributions are actually amazing, but this environment does not support that. And so are popping up around her anxiety, the sleep, the, upset stomach, the, just like heart palpitations, like those start to decrease as she began to just have that better understanding and also start implementing some strategies around managing her anxiety, around, carving out time aside from work in spaces where she could be affirmed. And the even cooler thing in terms of this being a success story is that this experience is not just this one client. Like, I've had several clients who've experienced the same transformation. And that's kind of what made me target Black professionals, particularly Black professional women, because I was seeing, like, wow, this transformation is possible and repeatable. And it's a fulfilling feeling that someone who, is just doing their thing in their career can really begin to kind of step into owning that they're like, you're amazing. You can believe that you're amazing. That's okay. And actually embody that feeling of, like, yes, I belong here. And just kind of stand in my excellence.
I love that. I just recently watched the Netflix documentary Sprint, just out of interest, because I've always wondered what the mindset of an athlete is. And I'd been following Noah Lyle's professional career as an athlete and always wondered why he would be on the TV and be so like confident. And to be honest, there were times when I was like, this man is just too overconfident for my liking. But when I watched the documentary and understanding that sometimes you have to believe in yourself, and that even from a cultural standpoint, touting your own horn like that is not something that is very encouraged, where you're like, I know what I'm doing. Like, I'm the best social worker you'll ever find. Like, I'm hardworking. Even owning that, right, is such a huge challenge for a lot of people, because there are different cultures that also encourage or discourage that type of talk or behavior, right? But then you also talked about a lot of like somatic symptoms, which is something new too in this space of sometimes like our bodies telling us that this is not going well. Like I had a client whose hair would fall off every time they got constructive criticism, and that we don't even associate some of those physical manifestations of distress. So that was actually I was like, wow, like it's so eye-opening when I hear you that there are some people out there that are experiencing that, and I really, really connect with it. And I'm sure, like everybody else, they are wondering how you have overcome challenges in your practice as a Black professional.
Yeah.
If you can share with us, we want to know, how are you doing it?
Sure. So as a business owner, this journey of being CEO of my business, has been one of the scariest things I've ever done in my whole entire life, right? So I am a very strong academician. I can study something, I can pass a test, I can write a paper, I can give a presentation, but running a business, never done that before in my life. And so I have been using these strategies in my own owning a business, running a business, coming face to face with things that I don't know, and coming to a place of like, no, Tenesha, you don't know this because you don't know this. Like there was never an opportunity for you to know this. There's never a reason for you to know this. And so it's okay to not be A+, in XYZ area of business ownership, because this is your crash course. You haven't even studied the book. So for myself, making sure that I have a sounding board, whether that is my trusty business partner and husband, whether that is, a therapist, if I'm needing that at the time, whether that's surrounding myself with other clinicians that are also business owners that are doing this and, kind of have a similar model of how they practice. So that's something that's really important for me. Also, my faith is really important. So, praying, taking my worries and concerns to God, practicing, deep breathing is also very important, because I know for myself, I kind of keep my anxiety comes up like right at my shoulders. So I'm like, and my chest stays really tight. So I do deep breathing to just kind of release all of that. The shoulders come down, release that anxious breath, and just take in some calming breaths. So that's something that I use for myself. So there's, different things that I use currently to manage anxiety around that. Definitely, like I have the training. I don't have any worries about my work with clients. I've been a therapist 15 years, but this business owner piece has been only 4 years. And so I'm still very much learning new things and evolving as a business owner, and learning to be gentle with myself in that process.
I love that. And congratulations on your business. I've been following it around for a while. I know in the beginning you mentioned what your business is, but for those that want to find you, where can we find you? I also know you mentioned that you've got different licenses in different states. So we want to know what those states are. Wink, wink for myself, who knows? So maybe I could get services or a little bit of advice. So tell us where we can find you. Give us all the information.
Absolutely. So the name of my practice is Brooks Psychological Services. Our website is www.brookspsych, that's BROOKSPSYCH.com. We're on social media, on Instagram, we're brooks.psych on Instagram and on Facebook. You can also find us on LinkedIn. I think we're Brooks Psych, all one word on LinkedIn. So yeah, you can find us there. We also provide corporate workshops. We do a wellness corner on our website where you can find all the information about how you can bring us to your group, your organization, and we can help you manage and learn how to grow in being more inclusive and having growth mindset to believe that things can change. We can help you with diversity, equity, and inclusion topics. We also speak on burnout, imposter syndrome, all of these different things. And so we would love to support individuals, organizations, corporations in building that. And so I'm licensed in North Carolina, Massachusetts, and Connecticut for individual therapy. We also do couples therapy as well. My husband is licensed in Connecticut and North Carolina for the same. And so we're accepting new clients. So if, people are wanting some additional support, we're here.
Do you guys take insurance or is it self-pay?
So we're a self-pay practice, but there are ways that we can help clients understand what their benefits are. So a lot of people do have out-of-network benefits that they can access. I also partner with an EAP. That's an employee assistance program. So people can access services through Modern Health. If their company uses Modern Health, I'm available through that platform. As well as a platform called Alma. So those are some places that people can find us and access some support.
Love it. And then I would like for you to just share some advice for us, your viewers, or anyone that's listening that has worked for you, or any nuggets of knowledge that you have in this 15 wonderful years of practice, either for a new clinician, for anybody who's just interested in mental health. What are some of the nuggets that you would
I think absolutely. So one strategy that can be really helpful when you're just feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling anxious, you just need to take a breath. And so stick your hand out and you can trace your hand. When you're going up, you're going to breathe in. And when you're coming down, you're going to breathe out. Okay. So it goes breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. And you can do it as fast as you want or as slow as you want to really just calm down, take it down a notch. I'll leave with that breathing strategy. There's so many different strategies, but that was a quick and easy one. You can do it, while you're just sitting at your desk. Just hold out one hand and just trace it. When you're in a meeting, you put your hand underneath the boardroom table. If you're studying, just whip out your hand real quick. It's great for children, great for anyone really. So that's a really great strategy that people can use right now in the moment. And what I will say is, one piece of advice is whatever you're doing right now is the first time you've done it. And what that means is you've never been this age with these responsibilities, with this thought process. Our brains are constantly growing. With this level of income, with these number of kids at this age, with
Mm,
um, these needs for your own health, physical health,
mm,
with these needs for your own mental health, with this particular area or level of relationship with God or whoever you consider your higher power. So every different piece of you is constantly changing.
mm,
And so while you may have written a paper before or done a presentation or excelled at your job before, you've never done whatever it is that you're trying to do with this set of parameters. And so
mm,
because of that, it is new. And
mm.
so be gentle with yourself. Give yourself a little bit of grace as you figure out how to do this thing at this time. Pull
Yeah.
from some of those strategies that have helped in the past. Definitely
Mm,
use that historical knowledge, use what you've learned, use the things that the ways that you've grown, but be gentle with yourself.
wow.
This is new.
Mm. I feel like you're talking to me today. So I am so appreciative. I'm appreciative for Tanisha for joining us today.
Absolutely.
She was so kind to come and do this for free. And with all this amazing knowledge that you have, I'm so grateful that we have people like you in the industry to help Black professionals navigate this life and understand certain things about ourselves that we never thought. So thank you so much for coming today. Thank you guys for tuning in. We will talk to you soon.